Welcome to the Painting of the Week podcast, where we look at some of the most significant paintings throughout history. Introducing your hosts, Phil Grabsky and Laura Bentham.
Well, hello, and welcome to this week's Painting of the Week. And in fact, welcome to season 4 of Painting of the Week. This is the first episode. And so this is our 62nd podcast. Crumbs.
That's mad, Phil.
Got a fantastic painting to talk about today. Madame X by John Singer Sargent. Madame Pierre Gautreau. In fact, that's her husband's name, so really we should give her the respect that she's due, which is her name is Virginie Amélie Avignon. But famously, this painting is known as Madame X. And it's funny, Laura, I'd never really noticed. But recently I went to my sister's house, or a part of a flat. And in her spare room, she has her desk. And above her desk is a print of this painting. Now, I spent a lot of time with my sister over the years. And my sister said, "Oh yeah, I've had this above my desk my entire life." I'm like, "Really?" And my sister, for a few years when she was in her teens and early 20s maybe, she lived in New York. She used to go to the Metropolitan Museum to look at this painting.
Oh, that's so funny.
So there's a connection. I have a connection through my sister to this painting, which I hadn't even realised. So
That intrigues me though, Phil, always. Why people pick what the painting is, why they have to go and see it so often. It is a funny thing that people do have a connection with a painting. I know that's one of the films that you've got coming up with the National Gallery. But it is so funny how people do have that. And I don't know, you didn't ask her why, did you? Or do you know why particularly?
I think the thing about this painting is not only is it a beautiful painting, but it is clearly a strong, independent,
Okay.
the message that comes across to me is a strong, independently minded woman, and also a very beautiful woman too.
Yeah.
And it's also an intriguing painting. You know, her body's facing us, but her face is turned away. It's a very strong profile. Look at the arm and the way the hand is a slightly unusual twist onto the table, and
it's funny, isn't it? We have so many paintings with all these mysteries and clues and things and one that actually is quite almost not a lot going on, and there's still mystery, a huge story, which is fabulous, of course.
Well, it's amazing how much there is to say about this painting, really, considering it's just a depiction of a single woman standing. There's no background, really. There's no, there aren't maps and paintings and other characters and
globes
and little cupids on tiles but it is one of those paintings that is utterly intriguing, unless I'm mistaken. So the reason that we recently filmed this is for our film John Singer Sargent, Fashion and Swagger. And that was an exhibition that began at the Museum of Fine Arts in Boston and then moved to Tate Britain. And unless I'm mistaken, this is the first time this painting has travelled outside of the United States.
Oh, right.
Since it was sold to the Met. It's the first time it's come back across the Atlantic. So, I went to both exhibitions, and it is clearly quite it's very arresting when you come into the exhibition space and you see this painting. As an aside, it's interesting how both exhibitions presented essentially the same collection of paintings and some of the dresses and other accoutrements in different ways. And broadly speaking, the Museum of Fine Arts exhibition was a bit more experiential. You almost felt like it was a bit more set designed, and it was a bit more of an experience walking through. You kind of went past the costumes a bit more, and the wall colours were different, and actually they built up to this painting.
Oh, okay, that's interesting.
The Tate was a little bit more coherent, in my opinion, intellectually, because the wall captions kind of made sense. Okay, this room is talking about this. This is him painting black, or so you kind of got it a bit more, but it was a little bit more educational. It's a little less experiential. And I didn't quite. You have to work a little bit hard. You had to work a bit harder in Boston to understand why that painting is next to that painting and why the route is this.
They're different curators?
Essentially.
Okay.
I mean, they work together, but Boston would have had its curator.
Yeah.
And then the Tate had its curator. So yeah, and their work is to, because not all the, there will be one or two differences in works that can travel. Some people won't do loans for the entire period of both exhibitions. Some paintings won't travel across the Atlantic. But the Tate had this painting quite early, so he didn't have the narrative development. He didn't build up to it. No. But in some ways, it kind of hung on its own wall, and in some ways it was more stupendous, actually, just because of the way it was hung. Own wall, the way it was lit. It is a staggering painting, and this is an exhibition, I have to say. You hesitate sometimes, but painting after painting by John Singer Sargent are quite extraordinary. I mean, anyone who hasn't seen the works of John Singer Sargent, please go and see the film, or go to your local gallery if they've got some John Singer Sargents. I mean, painting after painting is just fantastic. And our film is called John Singer Sargent, Fashion and Swagger. Both these exhibitions were focusing on, the Museum of Fine Arts called it Fashioned by Sargent, and the Tate called it John Singer Sargent and Fashion. But basically you had this discussion about fashion, and that it's not a passive thing. It's not that John Singer Sargent's not commissioned to paint somebody and he turns up and whatever they're wearing, he paints it as credibly and accurately as possible. It didn't work like that. And what it allowed us as filmmakers to do was look at how still today people create their image. So, we self-depict ourselves by what we choose to wear. And so John Singer Sargent would have a conversation with his sitters, some of whom may have commissioned him, some of whom this painting is not a commission, he just wanted to paint her, so he owned the painting from the very beginning. Some might be commissioned by the individual's husband, I suppose on occasion wife, but I'm not sure of any examples of that. And then he'll have a conversation with them. Well, what are you trying to say? And sometimes he'll make a decision. He'll say, you've just bought, there was this couturier called Worth who's just established in Paris, and basically if you think today of the Gucci's and the Versace's, well, Worth was the equivalent at the time. All high society women wanted to wear a Worth dress.
Oh, okay, with John Singer Sargent's time.
Singer Sargent's time. So when somebody saw a Worth dress in a painting, they would scurry off to Worth and say, I want the painting. I want the dress I've just seen in the painting.
Yep, okay.
But sometimes John Singer Sargent would say, no, you're not wearing that. I want you to wear the domestic dress that you've just turned up in, which is just black, rather than that beautiful deep red thing that you've brought down with you. Sometimes he would paint it in such a way as to change the actual nature of the dress. So he'll paint them in a dress, but he'll change it. And basically it comes down, as always, to storytelling. What is the story that you want to tell about this person? Now, he loved painting in black. There's a famous story. He loved, he went once to, he was a huge admirer of the Impressionists, in particular Claude Monet. He went to paint with Claude Monet in Giverny, and he was shocked because Claude Monet had no black paint.
Right.
The Impressionists famously said not to use black. And one of the reasons why you always separate Manet off from the Impressionists a bit was because he did use black, because he was very influenced by the Spanish artists like Goya, who also used black. Anyway.
That's so interesting.
John Singer Sargent loved using black because, blacks and whites are tricky because you think, but you can get so much variation in them. And actually, if you look at her dress, we think it's black, but actually you can see the shades of, there's grey in there, and there's even a little bit of white just to create the form. Totally believable, three-dimensional character. And then again, her skin, which is white, and again there's greys and even the edging in black. Brilliant painting.
What intrigues me with this, Phil,
Yeah.
I was actually lucky enough to go to that exhibition.
Yes.
I managed to get in, and it is 100%. If you're able to see any of these exhibitions, or like you say, watch your film. But it made me laugh because I went through all the paintings, all the dresses, amazing. The dresses incredible, and the fabrics and everything else. And the most famous painting of his, one of his most famous, comes down to a little black dress.
Yeah.
Which totally has stood the test of time.
Yeah.
And I know there's obviously more to this painting than just the dress, but it is funny that dress on that Madame X and the painting and everything that went with her was the thing that caused all the trouble.
And still today,
Yeah.
everyone wants. So, bit of background about the story.
Yeah, let's go.
So this was a woman that he loved to paint. He loved her profile, and she was where was she born? Was it North Carolina? I think so. Anyway, came to Paris, marries an older man, Pierre Gautreau, and it's probably a relatively. You get the sense it was a relatively difficult relationship that they had. But she was very, very conscious of her image, to the extent that she was known for, it's almost bleaching her skin really, but whitening her skin.
Oh, okay.
And if you look closely at the ears, she kind of rouged her ears. She's very proud of her profile. Now, John Singer Sargent, like so many of these artists, although they are radical, they also wanted to be accepted by the traditional salon. I'm sure many of the listeners will know that there was you have the salon every year in Paris, and really that was the place where you got your paintings hopefully accepted, and if you were lucky you then sold them. You were at the mercy really of these old boys wandering around with their umbrellas and their sticks, and if they liked the painting they'd raise the stick, and if they didn't they wouldn't, and you wouldn't get selected. And even when you were selected, so many were selected that they just put them next to each other, I believe in alphabetical order, but they just basically fitted them in like a jigsaw. If you're unlucky, your painting might be up the top of the wall, nobody could see it.
I actually wrote down a fact.
Yes.
Let me see if it's
Like
any good.
those.
1884, the salon had 300,000 visitors and 5,000 paintings were stacked up.
Phew, 5,000
5,000, yeah.
I mean,
so
if we go to an exhibition now, it's got 150. that's a tough
you've had
2
to get
hours.
around.
5,000.
Yeah. So he was trying to make, obviously.
So he wanted his paint. He wanted
something to stand out.
So he did this painting, and he wanted it to be accepted by the salon, and it was. But there's a significant difference between what you're looking at, and I should have said at the beginning, if you go to seventh-art.com, click on podcast, you'll see the painting. This is maybe I did mention actually, but it's season 4, episode 1.
Yeah.
Or if you go to our YouTube channel, you can see it. And look at the painting while we're talking about it. There is a significant difference, and actually in the film we show you the painting as it would have been seen by those 300,000 people. As we're looking at it, the left strap, her right strap, was originally painted so it's off the shoulder. It makes a huge difference. You are aware, it's pretty obvious she's not wearing any undergarments, but actually with it strapped down, you're completely aware of that fact. This was shocking. Now, it's not that the French was, shocked by nudity.
No.
Think of Déjeuner sur l'herbe in 1874. That was also a salon painting, a kind of slightly strange misogynist painting, it has to be said. But But this was a high society woman, well known, who basically looks like, she's looking at a bedroom and she's heading straight in, and she loved the painting before it went into the salon. Yeah. But the reaction was such that it horrified her, and her mother begged John Singer Sargent to take it down and destroy it, get rid of it. He refused. She got very upset as well, and in fact, just jumping ahead a little bit, he didn't sell it to the Met until she died.
Oh, right.
There is a photograph, again it's in the film, taken not that long after the salon ended. He refused to take it down. He kept it in the salon the whole time, though he was quite shell-shocked by the reaction. It's not what he expected, and he wasn't hard-skinned. He wasn't that hard-skinned that it didn't affect him. There's a photograph taken in his studio where, and it's not that long after the salon ended, where you can see he's already painted the strap as you see it now. He put the strap back up, and whether that was out of respect or he just thought it would make it more saleable, or who knows why. He lost his nerve, really, you could say.
But I mean, they really did go for him and her, didn't they?
Yeah.
The sort of, she did have a lot of lovers and things, and she was the sort of it girl at the time. So, which is actually quite funny, isn't it? But I suppose because no one expected that painting to be in there, sort of, saying who she was and what she was doing.
I suppose if society knew her, I mean, you can imagine contemporary equivalents where, Summer show at Royal Academy and there's a big portrait of somebody that is allegedly, girl about town, boy about town, but
she was originally American.
Yeah.
And he was born in Florence to American parents. Yeah. So did they never really feel like they fitted in to Paris society, and therefore as soon as there was a scandal, it's easy to jump onto one thing, and then almost like today, with the newspapers, you get, everything's going really well. One thing goes wrong.
I can't speak for her.
No.
It's a good question. I don't know how alien she felt in Paris.
No, but she went there quite young, I think.
She went there quite young. I mean, I think she went there young enough that she, certainly spoke fluent French. John Singer Sargent, his parents, particularly his mother, they travelled an awful lot, and he was drawing from a very young age, and he was a polyglot, spoke very good French, but I suspect in Paris he felt a little bit American, and when he went to Boston he probably felt a little bit French. Right. He is essentially American, and in London too. So there probably is a little bit of a sense. I mean, there were lots of, as Impressionism made its way in the United States into the 19th century, a lot of American Impressionists came across and went to Paris, and even kind of hounded Monet and Giverny, and there were a lot of everyone was drawn to Paris. Yeah. 1900, Picasso gets on a train from Barcelona. I mean, everyone's coming to Paris because it is the centre of the art world. And that's not, Chopin had come to be a musician. I mean, Paris was the most amazing place. So it probably wasn't. But he really, he's got an amazing personality. He really fitted in, knowledgeable, lots of friends in all the right places, sort of thing. I think he was very good at. He was very plugged in. Right. And he was a very good pianist, and he would. I mean, he's painting high society. So he hadn't probably had much criticism. So one thing like that would have affected him, because he was. I can imagine that it would. I mean, he did not expect that reaction when he put that painting in there. He probably just thought everyone was just going to love it. Probably. I mean, his paintings they've got a lot of character to them leading up to this point. Whether he'd suffered kind of criticism before this, that's a good question. I'm not sure, and I'm not aware that he had. So it probably took him by surprise a little bit.
Because one of my favourite paintings in the exhibition is that Dr. Pozzi at home, which I absolutely loved.
Can you remember the date of that, though?
Yeah, it's before.
Is it before? That's a provocative painting.
1881.
It's just before.
And I think that Dr. Pozzi actually, well,
See, one
of so many rumours that maybe that at one stage they were lovers, and he suggested her for the painting, which is, like I say, one of the things I read. But I love that painting.
It's an amazing painting.
But that got quite a bit of scandal.
You think so?
But nothing compared to what happened.
I mean, John Singer Sargent was very, very private, but I think it's fair to say that he was very, very privately homosexual.
Yeah, well, they did find some other drawings later, didn't they?
Found some
paintings,
other drawings
after he died.
And there's clues in the paintings, that, hands on hips and the way a wrist is turned, and whether that caused a scandal. What,
the Dr. Pozzi one? I don't know.
I mean, I think conservatives would have thought, that's a bit rich. I mean, conservative.
He does look quite beautiful in that painting.
Yeah.
And then there's where the tassels are. But once again, his hands. Wasn't John Singer Sargent one of the best hand painters? Because of her hands on the table.
Hands are brilliant. I mean, I don't.
Yeah, they're always slightly twisted and in really unusual shapes. I mean,
it is true that some artists kind of ignore the hands because they're really hard.
Yeah, exactly.
They can be great artists, and you look at their hands, and they're really not
exactly
not great.
Well, I think sometimes if I was going to draw a painting or a picture, I think I would be straight out with the hands.
I mean,
that's Dr. Pozzi's.
The painting that really knocked me out in Boston is one called Miss Elsie Palmer, and that's actually slightly after this. So we mustn't think that Sargent was kind of knocked back by this. He's not. He in fact, ultimately, he stops doing portraits because he's so fed up of constantly being asked to do these portraits. And in the exhibition, and you'll see it in the film, portrait after portrait is utterly fantastic.
Yeah.
Elsie Palmer, when I walked into the exhibition in Boston, it's the painting I'd never seen before. And initially I thought there was somebody sitting on a bench dressed up like an actor.
Yeah. That's amazing.
It jumps out at you, and you look at it, and it is just remarkable. There's lots of examples of famous men and women, and there's like Ellen Terry, who was a famous actress. She's dressed as Macbeth's wife, Lady Macbeth, and then there's a famous flamenco dancer. I mean, and all of these, but many of them have very elaborate dresses. I think what's maybe part of the appeal of this one is the simplicity of it. It is essentially black and white and grey.
It's actually, but it's funny because I don't know if there wasn't a scandal behind that painting. Like you said, we had a Christmas special, and both of us picked a John Singer Sargent painting as one of our favourite paintings of the year.
We did.
And yours was Miss Elsie Palmer, and mine was El Greco. So neither one of us picked Madame X.
No, yours wasn't. What did you pick?
Yeah.
El Jaleo.
Oh, yes.
Sorry, El Jaleo.
So, oh, gosh, yeah. I was going to say,
yeah.
yeah. That's it, yes. I absolutely love that painting so much. And they were both...
I've forgotten that Elsie Palmer was my pick of the year. Yeah, that's right.
And the dresses on those were, if you were looking at the fashion point of view, when you come back down to Madame X, is that the painting that everyone picks because of the story?
Well, we had an interesting conundrum. We were thinking, what's going to be the picture for the poster?
Oh, yeah.
And we had Lady Agnew.
Right.
Is that right? I got the type.
I don't know. We're going to have lots of fillers this one.
Anyway, or this.
Okay.
And ultimately we went for this one.
Okay.
There was somebody within the company who said, yeah, but she's not looking at you. For a film poster, when you walk into a cinema auditorium, it's so much more powerful if the person on the poster is looking at you. And we've done that in the past where we've had like when we did I Claude Monet, black and white photograph of Monet looking at you.
Yeah.
It's engaging. She's deliberately not looking at you. But actually, that's part of the appeal of the painting in a way. It's intriguing. It would be imagine if her head turned.
Yeah.
It's not as powerful a painting because, you can feel the musculature, you can feel the tension in her neck, you can feel the pride, the strange torsion and twist of her arm, even the way she's holding the dress with her left hand. And, there's a pride in her profile. I must admit, the ears I'm quite tickled by the ears now because they're rouged. You really notice it.
Which was a thing to do. It's funny.
Well, I don't know how common it was. She did it. I mean, this whitening of her skin.
Yeah. And then enhance your ears. I don't. That's not something that.
It's probably the only red in the painting, isn't it? Really.
It is funny. Are there paintings of her looking at full face?
Well, the ones that are in the film are all profile because she just loved her profile. We got a nice photograph of her, kind of 3/4, and actually you almost struggle to realise it's the same person.
So that's the painting that you've picked then for the poster.
Yeah, this is our poster image.
Yeah. Wow, Phil.
And
that must take hours to decide. Don't ever ask me.
Makes a huge difference. I mean, I think when we had Hopper,
Yes.
Initially I'd chosen another. It was a beautiful poster, but it wasn't his most famous, and I got a bit nervous because people were saying, "Oh, Edward who?"
Oh, okay.
So then we used the Nighthawks, the diner, 4 a.m. diner, and that worked. And people would say, "Yeah, we didn't really know who Hopper was or anything about him, but we knew that painting."
Yes. So that's exactly the same with this one then.
I think ultimately, if you're going to recognise a John Singer Sargent, it is plausible that this is the most likely painting you'll know by him. And if it's not, it's plausibly the most engaging. What you don't want to do with a poster is say, give people the impression that it's an art history lecture.
No, okay.
You want there like these artists are trying to convey narrative, story, drama, emotion, sexuality, this, that, and the other. That's what we're trying to convey in our posters about the films.
Yeah.
So ultimately, I think that Virginie Amélie Avignon does that better than the other choices.
Such a hard decision though. Some of those dresses, some of those paintings in that exhibition are.
I'm so glad we made that film.
Yeah.
Because we had to think about it because we were worried that maybe people didn't know John Singer Sargent enough that they would go down to the local cinema and pay their, whatever it is, ticket price. Actually, one, I've discovered that John Singer Sargent is actually more popular than perhaps I'd realised. And two, oh my word, what an artist.
Yeah. Well, I didn't really know him, Phil.
Yeah.
And now, Christmas special, he was both of our favourites.
Yeah, I know. Which was just by chance, wasn't it?
And then when I went to the exhibition, it was so wonderful. And so you just could not get out. I mean, it just...
Well, that's why we, and we've got a record of it. So if you can't see the exhibition, you can see the film.
100%.
and get all the background information
and the story behind.
And I must say, in the film, there's quite a lot more detail. We can't go into all the detail here, but in the film, there's more about this painting, and you just have the context leading up to it, and then what happens afterwards. Thank you for listening. If you have enjoyed this podcast, please do tell your friends. Please do sign up to our various social media things like the website newsletter, 7th Art newsletter, or follow us on Instagram, on Facebook, and we'll see you next week.
Thank you for listening to the Painting of the Week podcast. For more information, please visit our website at 7th-art.com or contact us by emailing info@7th-art.com. See you next time.